We are back. Another episode, Nothing's Off the Table, with my brother, Marcos Morcacos. Oh, man, this guy. I don't know if we should do this episode, dude. I don't know if they're ready for this one, dude.
That's literally what's been looping through my mind for the last several days.
All right, so Marcos and I have been very close friends since 2017. You actually were working at the sober living that I was in, my first ever sober living in California. And I immediately latched onto you. Like, I love you. Your personality is so great. You're always the shining light in every room you walk into. And at that time you were working like a very strong program of recovery. And like they say in AA, like, if you want what we have, you'll go to any lengths to get it. And I remember just being like, that guy seems genuinely like really happy and at peace, and I want what he has. And, you know, as the years went on, we both kind of fell off our sobriety wagon, and we would always talk about, man, if we did drugs together, that would be fucking crazy. And boy, oh boy, did we do some drugs together. Did we? And it was, it was crazy. I left Marcos at my house in California while I was in a drug psychosis in Colombia, and I left him with the dogs, and I came home and a bunch of stairs were chewed off in the house. Oh man. Okay. Anyways, you are now on the other side, as am I. You are the founder of a treatment center in Costa Rica called Nuno, and your newfound peace and sobriety has looked different than the 12 steps of recovery. We will get into all of that eventually in this episode, but you are a fucking miracle. We're both miracles that we're alive. But I think that your story can help a lot of people, and you are a testament to what happens when you surrender and you say enough is enough, and you take recovery seriously for yourself, not for anybody else. So without further ado, my brother, Marcos. Welcome, bro.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you, man. It's exciting. It's an honor to be sitting across from you. It's been exciting to like see you create this and to see you take your dark past and turn it into something useful, like create a bridge into your future with like the type of thing that a lot of people might try to just stick into a closet and not think or talk about. And I commend you for it.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Dude, it's weird because like you're a couple of years older than me. We both grew up in New York. And I feel like just like in our crazy party days, like our paths have had to have crossed and we just didn't know one another yet. But yeah, let's take it from the top, bro. Born and raised, what your childhood was like. Paint the picture for us, Marcos. Paint the picture, baby.
Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting story. It is. And it's one that like starts from the top. You know, I grew up in a very normal working class neighborhood outside of New York City for the first 12 years of my life. And I was the youngest member of like a big, extensive Greek family. I was the youngest of my 3 siblings and also the youngest of like all of my cousins. And from the earliest age, I was hard to control, hyperactive, mischievous, never malevolent. I wasn't like a bad person. I didn't like seek to harm anybody, but like I liked to do mischievous things. I thought it was fun to like break the rules and get away with it. I also like was pretty good at getting away with it. You know, like I would smile and giggle and laugh and charm my way out of it. And like looking back now through the lens that I currently have, I just see all of that as like different elements of my personality and different characteristics that started to form and develop that set the stage for addiction. And, you know, early on, I would say like the first sort of addiction that I experienced was the attention of other people. Like I was class clown. I was I was always cracking jokes. I had like Mark Riddle time with my family. I always like wanted people to be focusing and paying attention to me. I loved playing sports, and the sports that I liked to play were like ones that would give me glory. I wanted to be like center forward in soccer. You know, I wanted to be scoring goals. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be on like the receiving end of adulation and adoration. And that fed me a lot. I think birth rate psychology does have a lot to do with it. Like, I think that being the youngest member of a family is something that like I've witnessed a few times, like being in AA, being a treatment professional, communicating with different people who have had similar experiences to mine. I see over and over again. It seems like, like that's really interesting. Like the youngest kind of frequently has this set of characteristics and behavior patterns that like sort of set the stage for some trouble later on down the road. So I've definitely picked up on some of that. I had two really high performing older siblings. Like my older sister and my older brother were very good kids, you know, and my parents are immigrants from Greece who had really high expectations, and my older siblings met and exceeded those expectations effortlessly. And so they experienced like a more frictionless household and childhood than I did. Like I said, I was like pretty hyperactive. I didn't like authority.
Me neither.
I didn't like being told what to do. And yeah, just being contrarian in nature and being challenging in that way. It made things harder for me. And I also do realize now, I think about it a lot, because as I've aged and as I've grown up, like each day that goes by, I more and more turn into my father. Like I'm becoming that man, you know? And seeing how similar we are makes me realize that a lot of the issues that I was moving through as a child were his attempts to regulate aspects of my personality that he recognized in himself. Like it wasn't judgment and it wasn't harshness. It was somebody with wisdom and experience knowing the roads that these behaviors can lead you down, and just like trying to protect his youngest son from the decisions that he knows he's going to be making. And so that's been really interesting too. It's like something that I've thought a lot about. I've been like, wow, so my father's shame is something that he passed down to me. And like, it was just his attempts to be a good dad to me and to help me navigate this world well. But he passed down and projected like shame and guilt to me in his attempts to refine my character and turn me into a better man than he was. And yeah, so I can see how, I can see now that what I perceived as rejection or judgment or harshness was the purest love that my dad ever could have given me, you know?
It's very interesting you say that. I'm thinking about my father now because of that. And it's like addiction for my family is a generational curse, you know? And so my parents aren't immigrants, but I'm third generation Italian American. And, you know, I feel Greeks and Italians are very similar, that like we don't discuss our feelings, and we definitely don't discuss our feelings with strangers, and all your problems, like that shit stays in the house. You don't air that shit out, you know? But yeah, bro, very similar childhood as you know, like just acting out, loved being mischievous, great heart, charmed my way out of everything. wasn't a bad human being, but like can definitely see how my behaviors are those of later on down the line an addict, you know?
Yes. Yes. And yes, absolutely. And then as things started to move on and I started to grow up, like I would say that the first experience that I had with addiction would have been sugar. Like,
yeah.
When I was 10, 11, 12 years old, like I would sit down with a sleeve of Oreos and a glass of milk and I would eat it every night. I was also playing, you know, on 2 soccer teams and 2 wrestling teams and all of this. So I looked like an athlete and I moved like an athlete, but I started to develop this relationship with food, particularly ultra processed food that was definitely maladaptive and that would carry on into adulthood. But knowing what I do about addiction, knowing what I do about processed foods and sugar, it's super clear to me that I was addicted to sugar before anything else. It was the first thing on the table.
Yeah, exactly.
But I definitely exhibited very, very addictive patterns of behavior in that point in time. And something that's really interesting to like now know is when you mix dairy and sugar in the stomach, it turns into an opiate. So like cookies and milk and grilled cheese and pizza.
Ooh.
You know? Yeah. Gluten and dairy together like turn into, an opioid-like substance in the body.
Same like feeling in the brain. Same
Correct.
chemicals are released in the brain.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you start experimenting with like actual drugs?
So I was in 8th grade and one of my buddies had an older sister who was like a junior in high school, and we had been wanting to try smoking pot.
Yeah.
And like we had, you know, tried to figure out where we're going to get it and all that. And so my buddy told me that like we could smoke with his sister and their friends over the weekend. And I know that like most people say that they don't like feel the effects of cannabis the first time that they smoke it. That was not my experience at all. I definitely did. And actually from the very start, from that like first experience and then the next few, which was with the same group of people, like my buddy, his older sister, when it got passed to me, I was like so intent on like receiving like the whole full experience that I would inhale and like hold it in so much and so hard that I would end up like exploding and coughing and like having from the start a different reaction than the people around me. My relationship to it was different. And from before even experimenting with mind-altering substances, I was always very intrigued by it. You know, I was, when I was like 11 or 12 years old, I read a book. I bought a book at Barnes & Noble that was called Junkie. And it was about this woman born in, I think, Northern California, this girl. And it was about her trials and tribulations with like homelessness and intravenous heroin use. And it was like a really dark and sordid story that I think ended with her like being sober and having like a happy life. But I was like a young, pretty well-adjusted, normal human being from like a good family. I had love. I had my needs met. But I remember like reading that book and being struck with awe and wonder. I was somebody who was fascinated by altered states of consciousness. I was like so amazed. I would read this book and this girl would talk about how she sacrificed her family and shelter and safety and food and everything for this thing. And I was like, that must be so good. Like that must feel so good. Like she gave up like all of like everything for it. Like imagine how good it is. And that was that was my thought process. I was like, wow, you know,
I need to try that.
Like, not quite. I don't think it was like I wasn't conscious when I was reading that book, like, oh, first shot I get, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
But I also did not like recoil with fear. There was definitely intrigue. There was definitely excitement there.
Yeah.
And so, like when I was finally presented with the opportunity to like experiment with mind altering substances, it was like, I went for it.
Yeah.
I'm going for it. And I got super stoned and like had a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It was a Saturday night and we had like made plans and agreed that we were going to do it again the following Saturday night. And I was in a good school. I was in like a prep school that was a really well suited to like set you up to an Ivy League school or, really like, a proper path.
Yeah.
And my friends were good kids. We were all like good kids who, like wanted to experience life and wanted to have fun, but also were definitely intent on being successful and having a good life, And so like we talked about like, hey, yeah, like, we got to like not do it during the weekdays, like we can smoke on the weekends and like got to make sure that we have balance here. And, like we knew that we were endeavoring down a path and we were collectively deciding to endeavor the path with caution. And that first week, like waiting until next Saturday, I remember it. I was a little kid. I was middle school. It was all I could think about. I could not wait for next Saturday.
Mm.
And I remember talking to my buddy who's like older sister we had smoked with and been like, hey bro, like, isn't it like all you can think about? Like smoking again next weekend? And he like gave me this bewildered look and he was like, no, man. He did not echo that experience at all. And so again, I can say like, all right, here's my second experience with a potentially addictive mind altering substance. And immediately I have a profoundly different reaction to it than the people around me.
Mm.
And it was a few months of like hanging out with those guys, and doing my best and putting things together. The following year was my freshman year in high school. I was well situated in that like early in the year, there was like an awards ceremony. I received the Master's Award for excellence in academics and athletics. I was like recognized as a member of the community who is a leader, who takes my schooling really seriously, who stepped up and did whatever I needed to for the well-being of my soccer team and for my wrestling team. And so I was like acknowledged and revered by this school and by this community for my accomplishments. And at the exact same time, I was also like dancing with the dark side.
Yeah.
And so in that same year where I like received that award for excellence, I also like was put on the chopping block and I ended up being expelled from that school. And that was a really challenging experience for me. That was really, really hard.
What'd you get expelled for?
I was put on probation for, ultimately, like if we're being like really transparent, this was like a really prestigious academy that had a certain goal in mind. And it was really clear that I was going to be someone who was hard to control and who would like be problematic. They knew I was using cannabis. They like tried to catch me. They searched me. They couldn't find anything. And so then it was kind of a matter of like my grade level advisor sort of like found one thing to put me on probation for and then got another thing and like, the 2 offenses and you've got to go.
Yeah.
So there wasn't like a large incident. I never got into like a fight in school. I didn't bring any drugs to school. It was nothing like that. It was just like, we gotta like get this kid out of here.
Yeah.
They knew it.
Before something big did happen.
Yes. And I will also say that at 13 or 14 years old, my fate wasn't yet sealed. And I wonder what things would have looked like if I had stayed in the school that I had been in and I had stayed, continued to play the sports that I was playing, rather than like being thrown out and experiencing for the first time, like being ostracized. And like a lot of the friends that I had from that school, their parents didn't want them hanging out with me anymore because I was like the kid that got kicked out of that school.
Yeah.
And so I got like pulled away from this rich community that I had grown a part of. And I got placed in a new school. I was in my local public school. And at that time, it was a relief because like the prep school I was coming from had like, 3 faculty for each student and like a lot of eyes, and now I'm in this other school and like, I can kind of do whatever I want and like, no one's getting in my way. And so I stopped playing sports. I didn't sign up for the soccer team. I stopped wrestling. I stopped sports. My cannabis use accelerated significantly. On my first day of school, I was like walking up to school and I smelled pot in the air. And I was like, and I like kind of like a cartoon, like followed my nose. And it was like a few blocks from the school. It was actually called High Street. And everybody would
get high.
Yeah. So I found like my crew day one before school even started. And that definitely set the stage, right? It wasn't like my buddies and I holding each other accountable to make sure that we can still actualize a future. It was like I found like the burnout kids.
Yeah.
And yeah, that changed the trajectory of things for me for sure. I embraced my identity as the bad kid or the rebel. I continued on with cannabis abuse and also like food addiction, like binge eating sort of stuff. I wasn't playing sports. I started to gain weight. I didn't like the way that I looked. I didn't like the way that I felt. I would, it was like a slow progression over the course of a few years. And I went from somebody who had a lot of really bright prospects and a really exciting future to a teenager finishing up high school, getting by the best he can. And so by the end of high school, it wasn't like necessarily very dark foreboding, but the writing was definitely on the wall. Hopefully the statute of limitations is up on this, but
probably is.
So like, for example, again, like I had these parents who like did not mess around, and like I was only messing around, so my grades were horrible. And this story came up at dinner with my parents and my sister a couple of weeks ago. So it's fresh on my mind. So my report card came back and it was abysmal. It was so bad. But it was like the midterm report card, the one that's like not etched in stone, And so
Time
I was
to turn it around.
But mom was going to get that report card. And like the way they printed out the report card, it was like so that it would be hard to Photoshop. Like there was like a background gradient color on it.
Yeah.
Didn't stop me. I had this epic like team of graphic designers that like adjusted the whole report card to like reflect straight A's, right? Because I couldn't risk mom going to parent teacher conferences.
Yeah.
I needed it to be such a good report card that like, you ain't even got to talk to nobody. Let's go to dinner and celebrate,
How'd that work out for you?
I gave my mom the report card, and like for sure she probably just knew like, oh, this is a photoshopped report card, because she was like, oh, I can't wait to go to your parent-teacher conferences. Your teachers are just going to tell me what a great kid you are. Like, this is going to be such a nice experience. And I'm like, Ma, that seems unnecessary. I don't think that, there's no need to do that. I don't think. She's like, no, I'm going to go. We'll put it like this. My mom gets to the school for parent-teacher conferences, and as she's pulling up, she sees fire trucks, police officers, all SWAT uniforms outside of my school. She gets out, asks one of the teachers what's going on, and they're like, somebody called in a bomb threat.
Oh, man.
I don't know who did that. I don't know who did that.
I have an idea.
But they saved me from my mom going to my parent-teacher conferences. I'll also lob this up. My father called me a little while after this, and he says, listen, I know you made the fucking call. Did you call them from your cell phone? I said, no.
How old are you when this happened?
17. I was 17, I think. 16, 17. I said, no. I made it from a payphone, and there weren't any cameras anywhere close by. And he said, at least you have one brain cell left in your head.
Oh my God.
At least there's one brain cell left.
Did you get a mouthful when you got home? An earful when you got home?
Honestly, I think I was 17 by that point.
Yeah.
And I was so resistant and so combative and so dishonest that by that point, I think there was like a recognition and an acknowledgement on the behalf of my parents that like, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing we can do. Like it wasn't, they didn't give up. It was resignation. It was just like, I mean, we've attempted every possible
We're exhausting
means.
all of our options here.
Did everything.
Yeah.
We've done everything that we could. And there was a long, slow process whereby expectations continued to get lowered and hopes and dreams for the future just, remained optimistic.
Yeah. So you somehow managed to graduate high school. It's kind of similar experience as me. And you went to college, right?
Yes.
In the city?
Yes.
Yeah.
I went to Manhattan College up in the Bronx.
Yeah.
Towards the end of my senior year in high school was when people started to experiment with cocaine.
Yeah.
And I remember like being at a crossroads. I remember being like, this stuff is serious. Like this is a different thing now. And like I knew people who had cocaine problems. I knew family stories of this guy or that person who worked here, and I knew from media and the movies. I knew
this is a different beast.
We're crossing a different level now.
Yeah.
And there was an acknowledgement and a recognition of that. And also there was like the desire to know, like, what is that like?
Yeah.
Just wanted to know what it felt like so bad. And I was so intrigued. Again, I heard these stories of like very successful people who lost everything because of cocaine. Like that left me wondering, like, how good must that be?
Do you think that feeling of wanting to know how good it felt came because you did not feel good on the inside, or you did not feel good mentally about yourself, that you were so curious about these substances that made people feel so good, and yet they lost everything. But you were like, I want to know, because maybe subconsciously you thought that you didn't have anything to lose.
I don't think so. I don't, because the stories that we're talking about aren't like anecdotes of like winners.
Yeah.
Right? They're people who, like, sure, they experienced a really good feeling, and then there was like all of these horrific consequences.
Yeah.
So they're recounting stories whereby they experience glee and joy and bliss and horror and terror and torture.
Yeah.
My mind stuck with the glee and the bliss. Like, it didn't pay attention to the consequences. And so I'm more inclined to think that it was something characteristic of me, less of a propensity for fear, less conscientious, more extroverted, more brazen, fearless. I think that it is very easy to make the case that somebody who's hearing one of those stories would say, like, let's say somebody is experiencing a lot of pain and they're not happy on the inside, and they hear one of those stories, they might say, oh man, never going to do that stuff.
Yeah.
I already feel bad. Like, I don't want to have to face all of that stuff.
Yeah.
You know? So I really don't. I don't think it was like a reaction to an internal condition. And I'm not saying that I didn't experience an internal condition. I definitely did. I'm saying that my response to that internal condition was unique, and it was different than other people who have had much more horrific circumstances than I ever did. Something else that I think is pertinent to bring up and important to talk about, I had never realized until the last few years, and we'll get into it later on in the talk, why. But from when I was younger, when I was 4 years old, I was like bopping around in the back of my aunt's car, and she had to slam on the brakes because somebody stopped short in front of her. And I swung down and hit my head on a spare hubcap that was in her back seat. And I needed a few stitches in the side of my head. I have no recollection of the experience. And a few years ago, when I was doing research about traumatic brain injuries, it like clicked for me the first time ever. I was like, I hit my head really hard when I was a little kid. When I was 4, I hit my head very hard.
Yeah.
Later on in life, when I was seeking medical measures to address my addictions, whenever I would go to a center, there would always be like this thing that you would fill out. And like one of the first 5 questions would always be like, did you hit your head when you were younger? And I always said no. Like I wasn't lying. It just never occurred to me.
Yeah.
I do think that, like, if we're talking about like, hey, what's the recipe? What happened to create the circumstances for addiction? I think it's an amalgamation of different things, like some of the stuff we talked about, birth rate psychology, simple characteristics that are within me, bumping my head when I was a little kid, like getting thrown out of that school and ostracized. There's all of these different things that kind of created the right circumstances and environment for addictive processes.
Yeah. So you get to your senior year of high school, your friends start kind of experimenting with cocaine. That comes into your life.
Yeah.
When was the first time you tried cocaine?
In high school.
What was that? What was the feeling like after you tried it? Do you remember? Because like me personally, I remember the first time trying cocaine and I was like, wow, I fucking love this. And simultaneously, I thought, this is not good that I love this so much.
Yes.
Like I knew, but I didn't care because I was like, kind of like what you were just talking about. I was like, I'm going to figure out a way where like, I'm going to still get my priorities taken care of. I'm going to do the school and the athletics and the but I'm also going to use cocaine now all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It was electrifying from the beginning.
Yeah.
The first time that I used it, I remember like being like amplified and stimulated and like diving really deeply into a conversation with my friend and smoking the most amazing cigarette I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
And I also remember really vividly, like I had bought like a small amount of cocaine, did a little bit of it. And the next morning, it was like the morning and I just woke up and I remember the thought of being like, people drink coffee in the morning because it like helps them wake up. Like nothing wrong with
a little cocaine
in the morning. and then like you said, like the immediate recognition of like, oh, this is going to be so bad, you know, like this is going to be bad, you know, like this is not the sort of thing you want to be liking like that, you know? And so immediately, just like with cannabis, like it like really like became like a regular part of my life. The same thing happened with cocaine, and I used it differently than the people around me. My reaction to it was different from the people around me. I would lie about how much I would use. I would, I would go to any lengths.
Yeah.
To keep it going.
I feel like, you know, for me personally, once I crossed that threshold from like drinking alcohol and smoking pot as a young, innocent high schooler, kid, whatever you want to call it, to then jumping that bridge and doing cocaine, right? You go from like drinking and smoking pot, I feel is normal, you know, for kids or teenagers, and then you cross that invisible line to doing cocaine, which is, in my opinion, a hard drug. That kind of opened up the door for the other drugs that I have not yet experimented with, me being like, oh, like I did cocaine, so I can try a Xanax, I can try an Oxycontin, I can try an ecstasy. And that kind of like the guardrails were fully down at that point where I was like, I feel really, really good doing cocaine. I wonder how good I can feel doing all these other things that were presented to me over time, right? It wasn't, for me, it wasn't, I did cocaine. Okay, now I want to try everything else. It was, I did cocaine. Now I'm drinking and doing cocaine and smoking pot and blah, blah, blah. And then eventually someone offered me my first Xanax. And I was like, oh yeah, fuck it. Why not? Why not?
I actually had a kind of different experience where I recognized like the addictive patterns in place and I would lie to myself. So when I like smoked pot and then immediately became a pothead, I told myself then like, we're never going to do any other drugs because like we've got this addiction thing. So like nothing else.
Yeah.
And then the cocaine came into my life and I was like, oof, oh no. Now we're addicted to this too. That's it.
Yeah.
No more addictions. We're not going to do those pills, the pharmaceuticals those guys are doing. We're not doing those. Those are giving people real trouble. We're going to stay away from that. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So I lied to myself. And actually, I don't even know how much of a lie necessarily it was. It was like the next time that I tried a new substance, it was Oxycontin.
Yeah.
And this was like many years ago before Purdue Pharmaceuticals had to reformulate it. OC80s were everywhere.
Yeah.
Very high grade pharmaceutical opiates were all over the streets and they were extremely affordable.
And easy to get.
Yes. Yes.
That was probably, I would say, 2008, 9, 10,
Yes.
11,
Yes.
12.
Yes.
Kind of, I'd love to jump ahead a little bit because I kind of, just from knowing you and knowing your story, I feel, from what I can remember, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, you were out one night in New York City, you were hammered, and you got hit by a truck.
Yeah. That happened.
That was kind of the escalation of the beginning of your opiate addiction. No.
No.
Before?
No, it was before that. I was at a party at my buddy's house. We were all doing cocaine. I walked into his room. He was somebody who was addicted to OxyContin.
Yeah.
And I walked into his room and he had like some lines cut out and I thought it was coke. And like, he knew I did not use oxys. He knew that I was afraid of that. He knew that I thought they should all stop doing that.
Yeah.
And so I walked into his room and he had some lines cut out on his laptop and I like thought it was coke. I was like, hey, let me get a line. I'll shave you one off later. He's like, yeah. I like went down and I sniffed it and immediately like I felt and smelled and tasted different.
Yeah.
And I knew that it wasn't cocaine. And I was like, what was that? And he's like, that like
yeah.
dopey laugh. And I was like, oh. And I went out into his garage and he had those 0G chairs.
Yeah.
And I like swung back on the 0G chair and I lit a cigarette. I inhaled, exhaled. I said, oh, fuck.
Best feeling ever.
I said, oh, no.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Oh, no, man.
Yeah.
You know, it was the thing I didn't know that I had been searching for.
Yeah.
Just landed me right there. Yeah, so I had that experience. I was in high school then. My girlfriend and I at the time, she had gotten pregnant and she had an abortion. And I actually remember it was like, I was in Planned Parenthood with her when I sent the text message to the guy who sold the oxys to like go and buy my first oxy. That was also something that I hadn't pieced together until a few years ago, that like I had tried oxy. I had like done a couple bumps of it, but my first time purchasing it, and there was a resignation. There was a decision that I had made. Like I was like, I'm gonna do those things.
Yeah. Like I give up. I want that feeling again.
And there was some degree of lying to myself. Like I will do it a couple of days at a time and not do it every day so we don't get physically dependent. But I knew I was crossing a line. And at that time, you could get like one oxy for like 15 or $20 and it could get you high for 2 weeks. It's like shave a little piece off of it. And so I had been like messing around with it for a little while. And then our school went on a school trip to New Orleans. And I was like, oh, what a great opportunity to like stop doing those things for a while. So I took that trip. And while I was there, I felt bad. Like the whole time I was in New Orleans, I like felt fluey and my bones hurt and everything. And I got back around and I told my buddy, like, I think I had like the flu. And he was like, didn't you say you didn't bring any of those things with you? And I was like, oh yeah, bro, I haven't done any in a week. And he was like, that's why you feel so bad.
Oof.
And I was like, oh, no. And so I realized, that I had become physically dependent on opiates. And that was an incredibly difficult cycle to break, because it's one thing to go from sober, normal, fine, well-adjusted experiment with opiate. That will take you from, feeling a certain baseline to feeling a certain degree of euphoria, perhaps.
Yeah.
To be in the throes of addiction, the variance is much larger, because you go from brutal, hellish sickness to relief, euphoria, joy, and bliss, all in a matter of seconds. So it was as insidious as my first experience with oxy was, where it was like, wow, that was nothing compared to a year later when I had a ravenous physical dependence and I would wake up sick and sweating and bubbling in the stomach and anxious. And just one pill would just, it would make it all vanish and I would be cool That would be easy. All right, here we go.
Opiate withdrawal is literally the fucking worst, dude. It is
the literal worst.
It is some of the most painful physical symptoms. And, you know, when you're in it and you know what these symptoms are caused by, then it becomes also the mental part of it, which is like, I'm feeling like this because I am doing opiates and I don't want to do opiates anymore, but I can't not do them because I physically cannot stand this pain. Yeah. And, you know, it's like, I say it's the flu on steroids, flu times a million. It literally feels, it's like your legs are coming out of your body. It feels like someone's taking a hammer to your shins and your knees and your hip bones and your backbones. And I mean, we're in the middle of a fentanyl epidemic and so many people are experiencing these symptoms. And, you know, it's amazing to see you on the other side of it, but I'm obviously skipping ahead. I don't want to do that. So kind of walk us through the next couple of years of your life. Once you've realized now that you're physically dependent on these, how much longer did you go between that day coming back from New Orleans till getting sober?
It was an up and down journey. Yeah. And it was like windy and weavy. And there were times that, like, with the help of my family and with like a good psychiatrist, I would stop using opiates and I would spend, you know, periods of time kind of just being like a party boy. And I would, you know, do my best to show up to work every day and sort of just stringing things together. And by the time I was 25 or 26 years old, it became clear that I was going to need to do something more serious to address like my substance use issues. I would like take trips to Greece with I would go to Greece where my family is from in the summertime, and I would like clean up there every year. And so there were like these little stints of drying up and cleaning out that I experienced. I think that growing up in a different culture and also having a different place to go to and all of that maybe prevented me from needing to seek treatment earlier in life, like some of the other people that I knew. Yeah. It was like, we kind of had a built-in rehab. It's just like, send them to the village, you know? And so by the time I was 26, I sought help, and I was living in a sober living in Brooklyn, and I would like put together a few weeks of sobriety at a time. And on one of these occasions, it was at that time in the world when that song came out, The Club Going Up on a Tuesday. So it was a Tuesday, and I had just gotten my 90-day chip. So I was 90 days sober, and it was a Tuesday. And I was like, let's celebrate. Time to celebrate my sobriety, baby. So I got some pills and some coke and some weed and the whole thing. And I decided like, yeah, like, you know, we're going to go for it today. And this was back in the day when Finale was open down on Bowery. Yep. So I went to Finale and I partied, you know, club went up on a Tuesday, man.
That spot was hot.
It was so good.
It was so good.
So good.
It was so good.
It was so much fun.
I was like 15 going to that fucking place, dude.
That place was so much fun. And at like 4:20 in the morning, I stumbled into the middle of the street and I got macked by a fruit delivery truck.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I don't remember that. I just remember waking up a day or two later in the hospital. My right knee had been completely blown out. The doctors had told me that it was a complete miracle that I didn't lose my right leg. I had some guys from the sober living and my dad and my brother in the hospital. And there was no denying that drastic measures needed to be taken.
Yeah.
You know, I was already living in a controlled living environment here in New York and going to an intensive outpatient and doing what I could to address this condition, and things were getting worse. So it was like, all right, let's try what's next. I went to a treatment center in Texas, and they were firm and loving. It was an all men's program. It was 12-step based. It was very, very clear on the message of spirituality is the solution to your problem. It wasn't very therapeutic. It was a good blend of behavior modification and spiritual intervention. And it was exactly what I needed at that point in my life. I had like big, tough Texans who like used to smoke meth, and like these real gnarly dudes who would like tell me things. And there was like not a lot of negotiation room, and there wasn't a lot of desire on my end to negotiate. I wasn't dealing with people who were completely different from me and couldn't understand how I could ever think of doing the things that I did. Yeah. I was dealing with people who were just like me.
Yeah.
They echoed the same thoughts and feelings and experiences I did. And so it was easier to accept their advice, and it was easier to accept the solution that they had found, because I was like, yeah, that guy's like me, or that guy was like me.
Yeah.
And so I was more willing to listen to the advice that they gave me because it was born out of experience. And it wasn't coming from a place of judgment. It was coming from a place of love. And so, you know, they told me to work the 12 steps, and we worked the steps while in that program. I stayed there for 90 days. During my time there, I had a really potent and profound experience. I was completely relieved of the desire to use drugs. And because I was like so filled up with like life and gratitude and clarity, and I was clear on how pernicious addiction was, I walked into my counselor's office as it was coming time for me to leave. And I said to him, hey man, I don't think it's a good idea for me to go back to New York. And he was like, it's definitely not a good idea for you to go back to New York. And everybody there was going to like sober livings in Texas. They were going to like Dallas or Kerrville. And I was like, I'm not going to Fort Worth for sober living, you know?
Yeah.
And he's like, how do you feel about Southern California? I said, I feel great. Southern California. So a few weeks later, I went out to LA. I went through the sober living that I ended up getting a job at and meeting you at.
Yeah.
And it was like the start to an incredible journey of like self-exploration, of empowerment, of stepping into manhood, of overcoming darkness, of turning darkness into light. It was an awesome, awesome journey. It was a start to a really cool path.
So when I met you, and I said this in the beginning, first of all, I was new to LA. I was in treatment beforehand. I didn't want to go to LA. They were like, yeah, you're going to sober living in California. And I was like, go fuck yourself. I'm not going to fucking California. You nuts? Those fucking surfer, blonde haired motherfucker. I am not going to California. And my mom gets on the phone. She's like, how much? Let me ask a question. How much money do you have in your bank account? I'm like, I got $22. She's like, you're going wherever the fuck I tell you you're going. And you're going to California. I'm done listening to you. I'm listening to the therapist. So I get shipped off to California. I remember it was like my first, I got there on a Friday, and Sunday I met you at the Fledgling Society meeting. And I remember just meeting you, and I knew you were from New York just because of the way you talk. And you were just so happy and so vibrant. I was like, oh, this guy, like, I want to be friends with this guy. I'm pretty sure I went up to you and told you, like, you know, go fuck yourself or something. Like very New Yorker that like only New Yorkers would like be like, oh, you know,
yep.
I love that.
Yep.
And for a period of time, dude, you were like in West Side, Los Angeles, there's a large group of meetings that are all very young people or were very young people at the time. And you were at the center, you were the leader of the pack. You were at the center of that for a very long time. And, around the same time that I kind of fell off the wagon, you fell off the wagon also. And I remember like hearing about it and I was like, how? Like you to me were like, you were going to be like the next fucking Dr. Phil kind of like addiction guru in my eyes. And you were just so solution based and so like head over heels into the program. And I think this is really important because a lot of people who are not addicts or don't understand addiction kind of look at people and are like, how, like you got sober, your life got so good. How could you throw it all away again? And it's like, this is a fucking daily reprieve. This is a lifelong battle for us. It's not like, I say this all the time. It's like you get cancer, you go to the doctor says, you have cancer. You need to have surgery. You need to go through chemo. You need to go through radiation. And then you need to take this pill every day for the next 5 years. You don't say to the doctor, doc, actually, I don't think I got fucking cancer, dude. And like, no, there's a fucking tumor here. You got fucking, no, doc, I'm good. I don't need it. Addiction is the only disease where our brains try to convince us every single day that we don't have a disease. And, me and you, then we start using drugs together and partying and having a good time. And I remember it was just this total chaos and I wasn't so much pain and disarray. And I know you were also, but I kind of want to talk to the adversity of the situation, which was you had a really good life. You lost it all again from using drugs and you went back to using opiates, which I remember having conversations with you like, bro, like I'm afraid you're going to die. And you would be like, dude, it's fine. It's fine. I'm going to be fine. And like, we all say that until we don't wake up, and that's the scary thing. But this new path that you're on the last couple of years, since you've made it out of that, talk us through, you relapse, talk us through that next year and change or whatever length of time it was where you were heavily using opiates again. And then that moment where you snapped out of it and the new path of recovery that you found, that's solution-based. It's just not the 12 steps, big book, AA solution, because it's new. It's being spoken about a lot. And I'll let you take it from there.
It's important for me to first note that in sobriety, towards the tail end of those years of sobriety and that big recovery movement that like me and my friends started, and that things started to pop up, right? In recovery while I was sober. First, it was my sex conduct. And then I got a girlfriend. And so like I was, committed to a spiritual path and living a life of integrity. So like the, sleeping around stopped. And, but I still had an unhealthy relationship with food, the gym, my body image. And then, I actually tore my rotator cuff in my shoulder. I couldn't go to the gym anymore. And in that moment, my recovery collapsed because it was so contingent on this one aspect of my wellness, right? Once I couldn't go to the gym anymore, it drove me mad. And I remember I was sitting in my apartment. I had some years sober. I had a good life and things were going my way. And I looked up on my phone, casino near me. And I went to the casino and I played poker for several hours. And so All along my recovery journey, when I sobered up from drugs and alcohol, I then found myself falling into process addictions that were substantial, real issues that were causing problems in my life, that were driving shame and dishonesty, process addictions that brought about all of the same consequences that I was used to from drugs and alcohol. And now I was experiencing it all sober, which was almost more painful than in the past, because at least in the past I was inebriated and I didn't need to experience the ramifications of my decisions. So, you know, all of these addictions starting to crop up, and then also just like staying in that small circle of like young people in recovery and not branching out and not seeking the wisdom of elders, and instead growing cocky, letting my ego get really big and starting to look around the rooms and starting to see myself as different from the people inside of them. I started to get bored with the recovery program, and it was a slow decision of I'm going to move away from the 12-step program. And the sponsees that I had, I handed off to other people, and I encouraged that they got different sponsors. I stopped going to the meetings that I went to. I gave up the commitments that I had at meetings, and I started to abuse drugs again. And yeah, that was difficult. That was really, really challenging, because things do continue to progress. You know, like you don't pick up where you left off. It's as if you never stopped. And so after years of sobriety, and now I'm in Los Angeles, I'm, you know, on the other side of the country from my family or any of the people who love me or hold me accountable. I disconnected from my recovery community, and so there aren't those people to hold me accountable either. And it was just diving down a dark world of addiction and reprieve. And things continued to intensify and get worse and worse. And I would try to reestablish my sobriety, and I kept on going back to treatment centers, and I would complete these lengthy treatment stays, and I would go to sober living programs and complete the programs, IOPs, and meet with therapists. I would do so many different things. I tried so many different measures to just like get back on that path again, because I knew what freedom tasted like. I had experienced it.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get back. And I remember I would go to these meetings that I helped start. I was like a founding member of these meetings, and I would go and take a newcomer chip. And it was like devastating to my sense of self. And I started to wonder whether I had crossed the line from practices that encourage humility to self-humiliation. I had gotten to this place where my sense of self, my belief in myself, my self-esteem was decimated. And it's my belief that we only recover and get better from any condition from a place of love and acceptance. And I was so filled with hate and rejection and retribution and misery. And the people around me in the recovery community were baffled and afraid, and they felt bad. And I experienced like pity and judgment. And maybe these are just projections. Maybe none of those things were happening, but that was my internal experience when I was trying to go back to these places to get well. And needless to say, it wasn't effective.
Yeah.
And so in the midst of everything, like a good friend and a mentor recommended that I go to Mexico and I try ibogaine. And I was just at this place where it was like, why not?
Yeah. Like I've tried everything.
You know, I'm in my 30s now. It's like, you know, there's nothing left but tatters of dreams and anyone with a knowledge of addiction knows that I'm somebody at the end of my rope. So, okay, there's something in Mexico. It's illegal in America, but it's legal in Mexico, and it helps some people who have addiction. Why not?
What is ibogaine?
Ibogaine is an alkaloid that's extracted from the iboga plant. It's from Gabon in Africa. So it's a psychedelic alkaloid extracted from a tree shrub.
So you go to Mexico and you were given ibogaine. Talk to us about that experience, what it was like, and what you went through.
Yeah. So for like a few weeks leading up to my ibogaine experience, a woman named Becca came by every day, and she's somebody who straddles the line between Western medicine and ancient healing modalities. She has a master's in clinical social work, but also ran an ibogaine clinic in Mexico for a period of time. She had administered different psychedelic medicines, and she had helped other people who were in my position re-achieve wellness and sobriety using alternative means. And so she came by and she would just talk to me about myself, about life, about opportunities and possibilities. And I now realized she was kind of just putting a little bit of wind in my sails, giving me a little bit of hope, enough hope to get me down to Mexico. And I got down to Mexico, and the way that the treatment is facilitated is if somebody has an opioid dependence, then on the night of the treatment, you'll wait until they go into withdrawal. And after going into withdrawal, you administer the ibogaine. And we both know that withdrawal is a brutal and uncomfortable process.
Yeah. And
I had been promised by Becca that the ibogaine was going to make the withdrawal like so much better. It wasn't going to be that bad at all. And so I was down there in Mexico and feeling withdrawals, and my heart, I was down in Mexico. I was feeling withdrawals. My heartbeat was racing. I was sweating. I was feeling anxious. I was like really, really just torn apart. I was feeling terrible. The throes of withdrawal were starting. And they gave me my first dose of ibogaine. It's a 200 milligram dose of ibogaine HCl, which is referred to as the tester dose.
How is it administered?
It's a capsule you swallow.
Got it.
And within minutes of swallowing it, I felt it swirling in my stomach, and I immediately felt the withdrawal symptoms start to ameliorate. I wasn't sweating anymore. I wasn't kicking anymore. And so within the first hour of my ibogaine treatment, I was already in a place of like, wow, this stuff does work to some degree.
Yeah.
I was really jaded by this point. I had spent millions of dollars. I had spent years of my life institutionalized in my own attempts to recover from addiction. I was never forced. I was never mandated. I checked myself into facilities for months at a time to overcome my condition because I was told there's a solution through this modality. You can try this, do that. And so I was jaded. I wasn't in a place. I didn't go into my ibogaine treatment thinking like, oh, this is going to work. Totally not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. But I was out of options, and why not? I took the capsule. It was the tester dose. It wasn't the full dose, but just the tester dose itself was enough to ameliorate my withdrawal symptoms. And I was like, oh boy, we might be onto something here. And I took the rest of the medicine. I had a tough 24 hours. And there was like, a lot of purging, and I don't like really remember it very well at all. But like, I remember it being intense suffering.
Were you like, where were you, and were there other people around you? Like, was this like a ceremony, or was it just like you in a room, here's the ibogaine, and like you're going to go through these feelings and you'll be fine.
Yes. So ibogaine is an acute medical intervention, and iboga is frequently administered ceremoniously.
Got it.
And they're two different things. I was experiencing and receiving an ibogaine medical intervention.
Got it.
I was in a clinic. I had a heart rate monitor on and an EMT next to me who had been facilitating these treatments for 15 years. And he was well-versed in what to do if my heart had a certain reaction to the medicine and all of that. So I was alone in a bed. There was some music playing on a speaker, and a gentleman there to ensure that all of the safety measures were in place.
Got it.
And then, throughout the next 24 hours, there were a lot of trips to the bathroom and, just a lot of movement, a lot of discomfort in my body, like letting a lot of things go. And the next day, I was uncomfortable to a certain degree. Like I didn't feel 100%, but I was not in like withdrawal.
Yeah.
I wasn't 24 hours separated from opiates. Like what that feels like. Usually by 24 hours in, it's like just starting to ramp up and you're going to go through the next 48 hours of treacherous hell. Nah, man, like my legs were a little restless. I was a little bit anxious, but other than that, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And that was novel. That was incredible. And not only was I not experiencing intense physiological withdrawal, I felt pretty good. I was like kind of like at peace. I was like, this clinic was situated right by the Pacific Ocean. There was a vast view of the ocean. I was just like sitting in the sun, looking at the ocean, sitting all peacefully. And, since that point, as you know, I worked with and trained under the people who facilitated my treatment. And so I've seen what it's like to be on the other side of these treatments. And we have a terminology for it. It's called Buddha mode, and like when somebody receives the medicine, frequently in the days thereafter, this person who was tortured just a couple days before and always asking for something and like a cigarette in one hand and a Red Bull in the other and just like complaining. It's just, all of a sudden that guy's just like sitting, looking at the ocean, it's his Buddha mode, And so I did my ibogaine treatment and I was blessed with my Buddha mode, which was like the first period of reprieve and the invigoration of the hope that Becca had planted inside of me and the dreams and thoughts of what was possible and a real excitement around this medicine.
Yeah.
It's like, I was like, what is this stuff? And why didn't anybody ever give it to me before? Like
why did I have to wait all of these years?
Yeah.
Was this the first time that you kind of experienced like some real mental, spiritual, physical relief from addiction as a whole since you got sober when you moved to California?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. It was the first time being free since surrendering my freedom the first time.
Yeah, I can kind of attest to like the hardest thing ever is getting sober, experiencing that freedom, then losing your sobriety and that in and out of AA and treatment centers and this and that and just being like, I want to feel that peace that I fucking felt before, but it's not working anymore. What the fuck? And, listen, it got really bad for me before I got back into AA and stayed. It took me 8 years of going in and out to get a year. But I'm really, really intrigued by the ibogaine, the ayahuasca, and plant medicine in general because, listen, AA was made when there was alcohol and people were suffering from alcohol abuse. AA was not made when people were suffering from heroin abuse or fentanyl abuse or these highly manufactured, pharmaceutical grade, highly addictive chemicals that are made with fucking scientists to literally make people addicted to these drugs, and concocting these with like knowing what the brain, how the brain is made, and brain chemistry, and like if we add this special molecule, it's going to fire this receptor and they're never going to get off it, and we're going to have them hooked for life. So I think we as a society, mainly the US, needs to be more open to different types of intervention for addicts and alcoholics. Because, you know, I think RFK is doing a good job of this. RFK is also, you know, sober and in recovery, but it's not a one size fits all type of thing. And the pain you go through from opiate withdrawal is, you can't put it into words. I don't wish it upon my worst fucking enemy. The physical pain and the mental pain is just insane. But so you go through this program, and how many years ago was that?
5.
So you and I
4.
were, yeah, you and I were kind of talking offline recently, and I was joking with you. I was like, we're both in such a good place right now. And I'm like, I kind of feel like I blinked my eyes, and like all of a sudden, like you're just like fucking crushing it, dude. And like that peace and that tranquility and that bright light that you have is like shining through again. And me and you are similar, that like when we're in the right place and our lights are shining bright, like everyone feels it, everyone sees it. But like when we're not, everyone also feels that dark energy. We just suck the life out of everything. And I'm so proud of you, obviously, but I want to talk now about Nuno, which is your treatment center. It's in Costa Rica. It looks fucking beautiful. Do I have to burn my life down to go to this place?
I always got a bed for you.
Oh, perfect. May just need to go for a week or two, check it out.
Little tune up.
Check it out, you know. But it's so interesting how you went through this experience yourself, and then you kind of just pivoted your life, and you're like, this saved me. Now I want to take this experience I had and I want to save others. Mm-hmm. So kind of explain to me how you went through this process, and then your mind shifted to like, oh, I want to fucking do this, and kind of how it's evolved and where you're at now.
Cool. Yeah, it was a natural progression. It was a natural progression for me. I went through that treatment center in Texas. I was taken through the 12 steps. I had a powerful transformative experience. And then you saw me. I committed my life to carrying that message to other people who had the same condition that I had. And so it was just kind of part of my makeup that like, okay, if I find myself struggling and then find a way out, I'm going to tell the next guy about it.
Yeah.
It was just like, it was very natural for me. It was very easy for me. It would have been hard not to. And after going to Mexico and receiving that treatment and having such curative effects, I asked, you know, why didn't anybody ever tell me to take this before? And the gentleman who gave me the ibogaine like snickered and was like, because then you wouldn't have gone back to their treatment center. Mm. And I was like, wait, what? And so he explained to me that, and this was a while ago. And so at this point in time, like ibogaine was shadow banned. There was like, it was very difficult to find practitioners and facilities. There weren't like legal licensed facilities and clinics and hospitals the way there are today. This was a period of time when it was still like kind of hush hush and like, let's keep this off the radar. You know, just a few days ago, Texas signed a bill into law to put $50 million of research into ibogaine. The Texas Ibogaine Initiative by Governor Rick Perry has been massive. The VA hospital has been a huge proponent of ibogaine. So today we're in a space where it actually has bipartisan support in the Congress, which like almost nothing does.
Yeah.
But at that point in time, it was secret and it was quiet and nobody knew about it. And I knew that it was the future. I knew it. It's like the curative effects of this alkaloid are astronomical, and there's no way that it's going to stay quiet for long. No way in the world. And so I dedicated my life to the study of that medicine and then different alternative, holistic, esoteric paths and healing modalities. And just like I did with the 12-step community and that message, I've done the same with everything that I've learned along the way, which is like, how can I package this in a really cool, digestible format and bring it to somebody else who's in the same situation that I was in? And so I have my place in Costa Rica that I'm really, really excited about and proud of. And we specialize in cases such as my own, people who have exhausted all measures, people who have been through treatment centers, people who have tried everything that they can and want another solution, want another way out, and have exhausted all of the options available within the United States and its healthcare system. And so there are so many things. Just like I talked about earlier, there were so many different factors that went into like me becoming an addict. There are so many different elements to this alternative healing path that I talk about, because it's not ibogaine, like the magic bullet. That's very rarely the experience that people have. And it's an amazing first step. It's a great way to start, but it's a first step in a long sequence of things that need to take place. A lot of what I've focused on over the last 2.5 years has been somatic psychotherapy and structural integration and postural alignment, and paying a lot of attention to like the bioenergetic field of the body. And that was something that, never crossed my frame of reference while I was in Los Angeles. But I was introduced to an amazing doctor who had a few PhDs, and he started to explain to me that the way that I carry myself, the way that I walk, the way that I carry my shoulders, the way that I hold my head, that affects the way that I see the world, the way that the world sees me, and it also affects the neural circuitry in my brain. And so under his guidance and with the help of different plant medicine ceremonies and yoga movement practices, I spent years shifting the morphology of my body. And the result has been a very, very different bioenergetic experience where I move and operate in the world and I function very effortlessly. It's not this uphill battle. I know that even for my years of sobriety, I didn't have the desire to use drugs. I didn't. I was sober and I was grateful to be sober, but I did have to do so many things to stay in that place. I would go to a meeting at least every day. I would meet with a sponsee at least every day. I would go to the gym at least 5 times a week. There were all of these elements of my recovery program that were absolutely mandatory. And if one of them faltered, then I started to notice looping thoughts and I started to recognize like, oh, we're getting into deep water, and it would happen fast. And the path that I've found and that I've endeavored down for the last several years has been one that's filled with more ease. It's not about doing more.
Mm.
It's become about learning to be okay with not doing anything. Frequently, people talk about integration in the plant medicine world. And one of the biggest pieces of integration is sitting still with yourself.
And being okay with it. Good and bad.
Exactly right. Right. There's no such thing as, oh, I have an addiction to drugs. I'm going to go and drink ayahuasca every weekend for the next 3 years, and then I won't be addicted to drugs anymore. That hasn't been something that I've witnessed being effective for somebody, because we're just substituting addictions. You're jumping from one peak experience to another. There have been months at a time that I've spent in solitude, refining myself, practicing yoga, spending time in nature, and exerting myself and creating enough discipline to secure mastery over myself. And that's in conflict with the message that I received in the 12 steps. In the 12 steps, it was like, self-knowledge availed us nothing. And there was a message that my will alone will not keep me off of drugs and alcohol. And I still agree. And it's still clear to me that like the spirit of the universe, that God, that my ancestors, that like a host of angels have gotten me to where I am right now. I definitely will not say that I did this on my own.
Yeah.
I also do not want to downplay the efforts that I've put in.
Yeah.
I've spent years of my life getting to know myself and getting comfortable with myself. And it was also really, really fortunate that I moved out to Costa Rica, and it was also really beneficial that I moved out to Costa Rica, and I found like an awesome community of like expats and locals who were very, very like-minded. The area in Costa Rica that I live is filled with like artists and musicians and people who host retreats and all of these different people from all over the world who also needed to blaze their own path. And all of us kind of ended up in this little community in the jungle, and we're all really like-minded to a certain degree and also radically different in other ways. Cause like one of us is, French Italian from Venezuela, and the other one is, Greek from New York. And, so we have our like glaring differences, but also like we're all very similar people. And we all had pretty similar early childhood experiences and early life experiences. A lot of the people out there struggled with substance use disorder. A lot of people are making their way to the other side of their pain, and plenty of them stand really firmly on the other side of their pain. And they arrived there very differently than like the road that we took in LA getting sober.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much about shame and judgment. It was more about like love and acceptance. And there are these kind of like these two tricky tightropes that we need to walk. When someone's in early recovery, both are needed.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have to absolutely love somebody unconditionally, exactly as they are, in order to help them refine their character into the type of person who won't make those mistakes anymore. And I had grown so disenchanted with the 12-step process, and the 12-step community had grown so disenchanted with me that like we weren't able to create that symbiosis anymore. And I was able to find it again through alternative paths. But, it was critical for me to find the community of people that I did, because just like if we hadn't met and hung out and all of that, like it wouldn't have been inspiring. There wouldn't have been something for you to look forward to.
Yeah.
And if it was just me alone, like, you know, in a cabin, I would have been in the same boat where it's like, there's nothing to look forward to. And so there were these other people living differently, who were optimizing themselves, who paid a lot of attention to health and wellness and well-being, who didn't drink alcohol and use cocaine, do these things, but also who aren't sober in AA. And so finding an uplifting community of like-minded people who were also on a path was absolutely critical to me. It was just as, if not more important than the sacrament itself.
It's amazing. Your story is, your path is different, and it's unique. And with addiction taking over our world the way it is right now, it's important to kind of hear alternative solutions other than just this big book and 12 steps. And personally for me, I'm a 12-step guy. And I firmly believe in the 12 steps, but I also have the open-mindedness to understand that this is not a one size fits all. And there's other solutions out there. There's many ways to achieve not just sobriety, but internal peace and sanity and clarity. And that's what it's really all about, right? We all just want to be okay. We all just want to be happy. We want to be at peace with ourselves. And it's important to hear that. So I want to wrap up, but before we wrap up, I want you to tell somebody who's listening one piece of advice, whether they're struggling with addiction or it be something else. They're just not okay with themselves. Give them some words of wisdom from our boy, Marcos. And you do have a lot of wisdom, sir.
Where attention goes, energy flows. And if there are aspects of your life that are challenging, then spending all of your time focusing on them and talking about them will likely exacerbate them. And so anyone who's having a tough time in their life right now, trying to shift the focus from the things that are wrong to whatever might be right, and just like adding to that, is an important paradigm shift that can frequently help people who are stuck in a loop of negativity into a ladder out.
Love that. Bro, I love you. And I'm so happy that you're doing well. I'm so happy we're doing well together.
Yeah.
It's very nice to have someone who's been through very similar darkness and now very similar lightness, brightness, whatever you want to say, together. Thanks for coming on today, bro. And I'm going to link Nuno in the description. And if anyone is even thinking or just has questions, you can reach out to Marcos via Instagram, email, whatever it is. I will link his website. And yeah, bro, love you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man. Love you too. Wait there. One thing, pull your seat forward. We might want to get on camera too. So you mentioned how at a certain point you were in Colombia handling your business. And you asked me to look after your house and
the dogs.
We had both decided at this point, because we were struggling to stay sober. And so naturally a wise thing to do would be to buy a pit bull puppy. So we both bought pit bull puppies. And then you went off to Colombia and I was watching your house in Beverly Hills and the 3 pit bulls. And I turned your house into
a poker den.
I turned your house into a poker den.
After you asked me and I said no.
No, you said yes.
I do not recall.
Yes. Yeah. 3 pit bulls. Like you saw the aftermath. Pit bulls running around the house.
Dude, they chewed off wood fucking stairs.
Armenian gangsters sitting in the driveway.